Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another wonderful episode of Breathing is Living. We really do enjoy these little tidbits of information. And today, my special guest is Mr. Kevin McDonald, who is the Public Information Administrator at, and let's take a deep breath, the Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability. What a mouthful, Kevin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You got it just right.
Well, I admit I'm confession. It's written out on my screen so I can read it because that's a lot of pressure. And I'm going to hope that you'll tell me what it means because it feels like it means a lot of powerful things. But you and I had a conversation not too long ago, and you said it's I might have this wrong, ozone season or ozone time, and I am like, what is that? So what is that?
Sure. Yeah, it is currently ozone season here in Clark County. Ozone season runs from April 1st until September 30th. That's what we call it because that's when ozone, ground level ozone formation is at its peak in southern Nevada. And ground level ozone, when we talk about ozone, people often will say, well, ozone is good for you because it protects us from the sun's UV rays. Yes, it does. That's when it's up in the stratosphere. When it's at the ground level, it can be harmful to breathe.
Interesting. So how does ground level ozone form? I mean, like what are the factors?
Sure. Now, ground level ozone is formed. It's formed by a chemical reaction. It's when something called volatile organic compounds. Those are anything that puts off a fume. So paint fumes, chemical fumes, gasoline fumes. When those combine with oxides of nitrogen, which is anything that combusts. So that could be factory emissions, vehicle emissions. And those cook in the sun. That's what creates ozone. So it's VOCs plus NOx plus sun equals ozone. And if you remove one of those three from the equation, you can remove ozone. Now, here in Clark County, we have plenty of sunlight, like 300 days out of the year. Now, heat is also a factor as well. That's why during the summer, also more direct sunlight that's why it's so prevalent here in the summertime. When it comes to NOx, oxides of nitrogen, we don't have a lot of heavy industry here, but we do have 1.6 million vehicles. So those are all generating NOx. And then we have VOCs, which could also be naturally occurring. So vegetation puts off VOCs. An orange, for example, can put off VOCs. I'm not suggesting that oranges are causing ozone, so that's not the headline here today. But it is anything that puts off those fumes. So when you have when those combine, that's what causes ozone. Now, we also will have pollutants transport from other parts of the country, sometimes even other parts of the world. And one of those pollutants would be like the NOx or the precursor chemicals from Southern California, even China. Wildfire smoke is also a contributor to ozone formation, and we've dealt with that a lot in the last few years, a little bit even this year. But even if you were to remove all of those outside factors, we would still have homegrown ozone because, like, again, 1.6 million vehicles in Clark County, homegrown. And a couple things I want to point out why we have an ozone problem here. It's because of our geography, our topography, and our climate as well. So geographically speaking, where we're situated in the world, we're Southwest United States. So we're to the east of Southern California, where there's a lot of ozone happening. Also east of China, where we'll get pollutants from China as well. And then our topography, with all the mountains that surround us, pollutants can come and settle in. And then with the sun, it acts like a bowl and is a perfect oven for cooking ozone.
Right.
So there are a lot of factors that play in this, and the climate is a big part of it too. Because yes, the sunlight and the heat certainly play a factor. Right now during monsoon season, we've noticed that even moisture in the air can help contribute to ozone formation.
Right. So actually, one thing we can do nothing about. It's gonna be sunny and warm here, or two things. And we live in a basin. We live in a bowl. So those two things are not going to change.
Those two aren't going to, well, I could correct that a little bit because one thing that is changing is our summers are getting hotter. And we do believe that that extreme heat is a contributing factor to ozone as well. There are a lot of
Yeah,
factors.
that's going the wrong way, right? Like,
it is going the wrong way, correct?
yeah.
Because that extreme heat is causing other types of climate issues, including wildfires around the country, around the world.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in years past, when we've had severe wildfires that have sent a lot of smoke into southern Nevada, it causes a lot of environmental issues for us as well. Certainly not as bad as what happens where the fires are happening, but it just shows that, because one of our biggest challenges here with my department, within our division of air quality, is we're issuing our air permits to businesses to make sure that their pollution that they're emitting is within the EPA standards,
Hmm.
and they can do everything right. We can enforce every parameter of those air permits, so that all our sources are doing everything right, and we still can have an exceedance for ozone because of something happening hundreds of miles away.
Right. So it's not always just our fault.
Well,
However, I mean, like
correct.
us as in Las Vegas.
I think the way I look at it is we need to start thinking regionally and globally about these issues, because what happens one state away from us will impact us in other states, and what we do here could impact other states.
Yeah.
Again, not to harp on it too much, but we do have plenty of vehicles here that are that have emissions. So we are creating ozone as well. The one thing I can say is if we removed every vehicle from Clark County tomorrow, had no more vehicles, we wouldn't have an ozone problem, but we would still have ozone.
Right. Well, I mean, that is something that occurs, right? I mean, that's never going to go away. It's the amount that you're dealing with.
Yes. Correct.
And interesting enough, this is, and I own a car, but I don't drive every day. That's one of the pleasures of working out of your house, right? Or
Right.
is we have reduced, our drive time. But I do breathe every day, all day, 24/7. Air is coming in and then going out. So it does make a difference to me. And not only that, but I just told somebody I can qualify as a crazy cat lady because I do have 2 cats, and those cats live way better than I do, and they're breathing the air. So I do care very much
Yes.
about the air that I and my cats are breathing. And therefore, I care about the air you're breathing, Kevin, because we live in the same city and we're breathing the same air. So I feel people care, but then I think about the overwhelming solution. And I'm wondering if you guys have thought about like small things, like one small thing that like each and every citizen could do in order to help. Is there something like that out there?
Sure. We encourage people because we have done everything we can with our permitted business community,
Mm-hmm.
and we also well, when I talk to folks about air quality issues here in Southern Nevada, what I tell them is you can play a part in this too. If you have a vehicle, how you maintain and operate your car can make a difference. So, for example, if you do drive a car, you keep it well maintained, right down to oil changes and balanced tires. When a car is well maintained, it's burning fuel efficiently. You're getting the most gas mileage out of it. So and that's another incentive, but it is burning the fuel efficiently. Also, if you have options to work from home or work remotely, great. Take advantage of that because there's one less car on the road. Also, take public transportation if you can. And if you have to go out and run errands, which we all do, map out the routes so that you're doing it more efficiently. You can also carpool. One of my favorite tips with your car, when you have to go fill it up for gas, do it after sunset or before sunrise if you can, because when you're filling up your gas tank, that's emitting those volatile organic compounds, the fumes from your gas. So if you fill your gas tank after sunset, you remove one part of that equation. Another one that we encourage people is to not idle unnecessarily. Obviously, if you're in traffic, you can't turn your car on and off. But if you're going to go grab lunch or grab a coffee, instead of going through the drive-through, park the car and walk inside. That because every little bit that you turn off your vehicle helps. And
Interesting.
and one thing, and I've learned this with people who are much closer to vehicles and the way the engines run. Turning your car on and off doesn't hurt the vehicle as much as people think it does.
Oh,
And
okay.
actually, You don't have to let your car warm up or cool down or whatever. You can just turn it on, turn it off, and go. If you're gonna sit somewhere for longer than 10 seconds, your best bet is to turn the vehicle off. An idling car does not run fuel efficiently. You're burning money in that regard too. But it also helps us and it helps everyone because again, as you said, we all breathe the same air, and every little bit counts toward removing those emissions from the air.
It's so interesting. When I asked that question, I had one answer in mind, and you did cover it. But all of those other things are are doable. So my one thought was, so when I first moved here, I didn't have a car, and I did
Uh-huh.
take public transportation, and I'm fine with that. And I actually still like the idea. And often, if I want to go to the strip, I take the bus, right? Because I don't want to have to park my car and blah blah blah. But in the middle of the summer, when we're having hotter summers than normal, sometimes it's hard to wait for a bus because, and I could see why people would be like, I don't want to do that. So, but, and I am guilty of using the drive. The other day I went through the Starbucks drive through, didn't think about how much, first of all, I'm getting more exercise because I'm getting out of my car, which is better for my body. And if I shut off my car and go in, I'm helping the environment. How easy is that to
Right.
do?
It's one thing that every one of us has to be mindful of, myself included. I know I go into drive-throughs as well. So if we start thinking just a little more in those terms, again, you're gonna probably use about the same amount of time. You're gonna use less gas, and you're gonna put fewer emissions into the air.
Yeah. And rarely is it a time issue for me at a drive through. It's laziness. I'm going to tell you up front. It's me being like, I don't want to get out of the car. It's hot out there. But you know what? I am willing to tell you this. If I weigh my options, cleaner air or laziness, cleaner air is going to win.
Yes, agreed.
Right?
And
So, wow.
it's also important to note because like even on a day like today, when we're recording this, we're expecting moderate air quality for ozone. Now, moderate, that means if you don't have breathing sensitivities, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're somebody with asthma or COPD, older adults, young children, and even your pets, moderate air quality can impact their breathing.
Hmm.
And so that's why, even on days, like I said, when we don't have an ozone exceedance, and I can get into that later if we want, when we don't have really, really high ozone uh, or other pollution, we have to always be mindful of what is in the air we share, which is
Mhm.
why we put out our daily forecast, but we also have an app. Well, it's an EPA app called Air Now. You can download to your phone and get real-time air quality data, so you can see what's happening right now. If you want to go outside for a walk, or if you're going to do some gardening or whatever, you're looking for a time of day to do this, you'll check the app to see what the air quality is like.
Man, oh man, oh man, that is unbelievable. Sorry, my alarm went. I was here. We thought we turned everything off. My alarm just went off. Okay, so along those lines, then help me figure this out. Are you, as the Office of Environment and Sustainability, actually doing the measuring, or is there another organization that measures this? Do you guys, not you personally, because you are Clark County, but is there a national organization that monitors this? I mean, what's
With
happening?
For local air quality, our we the Department of Environment and Sustainability is broken into three offices. We have or divisions with the Division of Air Quality, Office of Sustainability, and the Desert Conservation Program. The Division of Air Quality is what we're talking about today with ozone. So
Mhm.
that division, we have four sections. We have our planning section, which they're the ones that are analyzing and researching the rules and EPA regulations and how we're going to implement that at the state level and the local level. We have the permitting department or section, excuse me, and there is exactly what it sounds like. They write the permits for our permitted business community. And the compliance section, they enforce those rules. Now, that with that enforcement, that could be everything from a warning, or they could be given a notice of violation, of which may carry a monetary penalty. The fourth section there is monitoring, and that's the group where they maintain um, a network of 17 monitoring stations that are placed throughout Clark County.
Mm.
And those monitoring stations are working day and night, and they're pulling information out of the air and analyzing for 6 criteria pollutants, as the criteria pollutants are defined by the EPA. And that is going to be ozone, particulate matter, which we measure in 2 sizes, PM10 and PM2.5. PM10 is larger, PM2.5 is smaller. Sulfur dioxide, uh, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and then lead. And I think I got them all there. But the main ones that we're talking about, like ozone and particulate matter, are the ones that are top of mind for most people. And so we do all the monitoring ourselves, and we report that out in real time via our website as well as the Air Now app. And what we're doing, but the rules that we have to follow, that comes from the EPA. So there's a threshold, like we're talking about ozone. The threshold for an exceedance, for like a day when the ozone is too high, it's part of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards as put forth by the EPA, NAAQS. Now, the current NAAQS for ozone is if ozone exceeds 70 parts per billion over an 8-hour rolling average in one day, that's an exceedance. So the measurement doesn't, it's just a measurement that we use.
Yeah.
So if you have just one monitoring station that averages out more than 70 parts per billion over 8 hours, then that's an exceedance.
Okay.
So this year so far, we've had 8 exceedances for ozone, which is significantly less than last year. I think 4 of those this year so far, though, have been wildfire smoke influenced. We haven't had a lot of smoke, but we had just enough to where it's going to push us over the top. Now, when I mentioned the 8 exceedance days, comparatively speaking, a year ago, I believe we had a total of 28. And the year before that, we had 15 total. So in both those years, wildfire smoke was certainly a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the one year when we had very low ozone exceedances, 2019, we only had 3 for the year. We had no discernible wildfire smoke in the region. Again, wildfire smoke is not the only thing causing ozone, but it's become such a regular thing that this year was the first year that we issued, alongside our annual seasonal ozone advisory, we issued a wildfire smoke advisory for the entire length of ozone season, because for the last 5 years we've been dealing with it, and we want to keep people, keep them aware that this is an ongoing problem.
Mm-hmm. And we have the added disadvantage of being a basin and heat. So if it settles in our valley, it is what it is. So
and that's and yeah, you talk about when it settles in the valley, because the other issue there is if we have a lot of high pressure days where we don't have a lot of air circulating, it does. It just sits there and cooks. It's like a big stew, is what it's been referred to around here.
Interesting. I'm glad to hear we've had less this year so far than last year. I'd like to think because we're paying more attention, but it's probably because we've had less wildfires. But I'm going to pay more attention. You know what? I was like, if one person every day pays more attention, we'll eventually get there. It might be slow, but I like the idea of maybe one person in every section of the city will pay attention, because I think that's a great idea. And I'm going to commit to stop going through drive-thrus. I'll turn off my car and get out. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm going to get in my 10,000 steps if I do that. So that's why I wanted to do this. Like, I know there's ways, like, and I can't take on everything. Like, I'm one person, right? Like, I'm not going to wave a magic wand and fix things, but wow, I love when it's small, actionable things that we can do.
Right, and that's where with people with their cars, because one thing I should point out, our department, we don't regulate vehicles, what we refer to as mobile source emissions. The state does, the smog checks and such. That's the state. That's not us. However, the vehicle emissions are a contributor to air pollution, so we keep an eye on it. That's why we always encourage folks, how you drive and what you drive certainly makes a difference. And we've seen historically, one thing that's interesting to point out is, if you look at ozone trends historically here in Clark County, dating back to as far as 2003, we are declining in terms of ozone concentrations. So we're moving in the right direction. A lot of that's because I think vehicles are being built to burn fuel more efficiently. But so we're moving in the right direction. That doesn't mean that we can't do more, and we should do more.
Right. And ozone's not going to go away. I mean, it happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're never going
Correct.
to. Okay, so I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask, and this may be a question that can't be answered either, but um, you said we have stations, those are spread out all over the valley, yes?
Yes.
Or are they centrally located and that's it?
Nope, we have them in population bases. We also have them out in rural areas. We have one up in Mesquite. So we have them, like I said, they're positioned all over. I think, and 13 of those are monitoring for ozone, and that way we can get a really good, clear view of the trends there. And like I said, so we have 13 stations monitoring for ozone. The most that I've seen this year, I think, in terms of an exceedance day, I think 5 or 6 of those 13 registered the exceedance. The rest did not. So that's one other thing. So when we have an exceedance day, it's not the whole of Clark County. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually going to be concentrated in certain areas. Now, of course, last August when we had that weekend with all the wildfire smoke where it looked like fog,
Yeah,
we had that was an across the board exceedance.
yeah,
But we don't have too many of those, fortunately.
yeah, yeah, fortunately. So then my next question is, um, there's obviously a numeric value on the exceedance day is X number of particulates per whatever. I mean, I don't know what the technical language is. Is there really a, is there really a difference between the 0.01 and 0.02? Or, I mean, I realize there's a cutoff. I guess what I'm saying is when you start to butt up close to that exceedance day, you're still in a really kind of gray, hard to breathe area, right?
It can be, and that's where, like, on a day, because on a day when it's 70 parts per billion and not 1 percentage point more or less,
Mm-hmm.
that technically is not an exceedance day. It gets
Right.
to 71 parts per billion, all of a sudden, so that 1 part per billion becomes an exceedance. So again, for the average person, they're probably not going to be affected by moderate air quality. But for someone, again, if you have asthma, COPD, or otherwise might be compromised, it
Mm-hmm.
could, and especially
Okay.
during the peak of the day. So like around ozone usually is at its peak here between, I'd say, 2 to 5 p.m. And so in that part of the day, it could be a little more of a challenge for those folks.
Right.
So it's that's why it's always important to know and to understand your own limitations. I always point out that if you have genuine concerns about your health with regard to air quality, consult your doctor or physician. They can help you. But like I said, if you're looking for the perfect time in the summer to exercise or do something outdoors, in the morning or evening are always better.
Mm-hmm. Well, that and the heat will kill you here as
There's
well
that.
in the
There's
middle of the
that too.
day. 5 o'clock, isn't that like the apex of our hot time? Plus, it's also whenever like regular 9 to 5ers get out of work, and that's commuting time. And I can imagine that's a tough time in Vegas for particulates in
Yeah,
general.
it can be.
Now,
No,
you said you have, oh,
go ahead.
I would say you have counterparts in Northern Nevada. They're also measuring Northern Nevada emissions as well, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. Because, we love Reno. I love Northern Nevada. I like it every once in a while when I'm down here going, why am I dying of heat? I need to go to the mountains. But
Right. I hear you.
I, and they have different emissions issues than we do. They're closer to California fires a lot of times as well,
Well,
aren't they?
right, because last summer when all those wildfires, where the peak, we would get up into what would be the hazardous level, I think, on the AQI, the air quality index.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the highest we got last year in the air quality index was 154. 101 is an exceedance. I think there were days in Washoe County when they were up in the 400s.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
that much closer to smoke. So it it's not great here when we have those poor air quality days from wildfire smoke, but it could be significantly worse, and is for those that are nearer to the fire.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And ozone, if I'm not mistaken, is just one segment of poor air quality, or is that the only one?
Well, right now, because for those six criteria pollutants I mentioned earlier, we are in attainment for five of those. The sixth one is ozone that we're currently in what's called moderate attainment, and that's because we've had, one thing I should point out is that the threshold for what's considered an exceedance is currently 70 parts per billion. Up until a couple of years ago, I think 3 years ago, it was 75 parts per billion. So, and in years past, it was 85 parts per billion. So the EPA keeps lowering the standard, which is
Mm-hmm.
perfectly understandable.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, all this to say that some days that we've had exceedances this year weren't always exceedances in years past,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all relative to that, I suppose. But when it comes to particulate pollution, that's going to be dust, smoke, and soot, um, we will have issues with PM 2.5. Those are the smaller particles. That's going to be more of the smoke and the soot. We will have issues with that in the fall and early winter in certain parts of the valley. Um, PM10, that's dust. This year we've had an especially dusty spring and summer, and part of that's because we had a lot of high winds, and we could theorize that brought in a lot of dust from other parts of around southern Nevada, those dry lake beds and such. That the drought conditions have contributed because things are drier, so it's bringing more of that dust in here. Here locally, we've worked very hard to keep the dust down. So, for example, if you drive past any construction site, like where they're doing that new constructions on the Durango Casino at Durango and the 215,
Mm-hmm.
you'll look if you see a big looks like a water truck that's suspended. That's because they need to keep the water there to help wet down the soil so that they're not kicking up a lot of dust.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always inspecting those sites to make sure that they are within compliance uh, for dust control measures. Um, so, but we don't have the same problems there because several years ago, dust was an issue. It isn't so much now.
Mm-hmm.
And I, we have cut dust in half over the last, I
Wow.
think, 15, 20 years. So we don't have a dust problem anymore. And I think that's important to stress. So when all that dust that we have for dust storms, that's not much of that's not much is homegrown.
Yeah. I mean, nature. We don't want to do anything about nature. That's what keeps us going is that we have nature. So I'm okay with certain things happening, and we
Well,
chose to live here, right? I mean, we chose the desert, so we put up with desert issues.
right, going back for a moment when we talked about the different parts of my department, the Office of Sustainability is here to address some of those human-made issues.
Yeah.
So, because we talk about extreme heat and how can we address that to be resilient and sustainable, we're working on issues on addressing that challenge. But yeah, there are things in nature that are going to happen we can't do anything about. We just don't want to add more to it.
Right. Agreed. Like, wholeheartedly agree, which is why I was thankful there is actually some actionable things that we can do. And so that we're not all sitting here going, oh, I wish, I wish, I wish, which,
Right.
I guess it's funny because I told you the leaf blower guys come through and literally just blow around dirt. But, but I get it. We live here. So we make the most of it. And I love it here. And I want to continue to be able to live here, right? Like all of us.
Right. Agreed. Same here.
So,
And I think we are making progress, and we will continue to make progress. And it's going to require a little bit of effort, from everybody.
yeah. And that's true no matter where you live. We
Right.
all, I mean, you know what? It's everybody has their own different issues. It's flooding in some places, it's extreme cold in some, all of us are in it together, right? Everybody's got to start just doing a little tiny bit, and we can make things work out, which I'm excited about. Which is why I really appreciate you. Who knew that a conversation about ozone would be this interesting? At least interesting to me. I thought
Well,
it was interesting.
I knew, but
So
I
I
appreciate
really
that.
do. I appreciate you coming and joining us and actually giving us hope, which is another thing that I think is really awesome. Is I'm walking away from this going, I have a couple of things I can do. I like to group my trips. I don't love driving in Las Vegas. I'm from California. I'm an aggressive driver. Let's just use the word aggressive. But
Okay.
I'm fully aware of it. So I try and like reel it in every day. And I'm like, the less time I spend in my car, the better the rest of the world is. That's how I view it. so
I think that's true of all of us.
so I really do appreciate you joining us, Mr. McDonald. Can
Thank
I
you very much for having me, Sherry. Appreciate it.
can I call you Kevin?
You may.
Oh, you're so good to me, sir. But I do appreciate it. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we have a few other topics we can probably cover about air. I don't know what they are, but I'm going to talk to you about it, and let's see if you can come back on and give
Oh,
us more,
happily. I'd love to.
yeah, more great information, which I do really appreciate. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.